Welcome to Musings Television, where your host, Fabian, invites you to bloom with a new perspective that will encourage, uplift, and inspire. Here he is with today's musings.
On this week's episode of Musings of the Mind, Prose to encourage, inspire, and uplift, we come to you from the penfieldriver in Gordontown, St. Andrew, with a beautiful waterfall and the melodious sounds forming the backdrop for this week's reflection. Beauty in your ridges. Are you rough around the edges? If you are, see those rough edges as you see the grandeur of the hills and mountains that surrounds us. Their ridges represent the strength in their years, towering above the plains, offering cover from deadly winds and shadow from the grueling rays of the sun. The beauty in your ridges gives birth to trees, which provides oxygen to those around us. Within your ridges lie watersheds that refresh the inhabitants within the shadow of your plains, giving wood for the fire and cabins for shelter. You may be rough around the edges, steep and tiring to climb, but only those with eyes which see beyond the physical and the perseverance to ascend your mountain will appreciate the beauty in your ridges and experience all that is breathtakingly you. Does that sound like you? Are you rough around the edges? I'm sure that's a line that many of us would have heard, and it might be used to describe somebody who is possibly unpolished in their behavior, uncultured, somebody who is from the village, not accustomed to the metropolis or the metropolitan lifestyle, and those rough edges might be seen by others as being somewhat undesirable, or oftentimes it's used as a criticism which is aimed not to uplift, not to inspire, not to encourage, but will probably have the opposite effect of letting somebody feel less than they are if somebody to whom those lines are attributed is low in self-esteem. It could also affect how they see themselves and cause them to question who they are, their individualism, what makes them unique and what makes them special. So, if today you find yourself on the other side of such a criticism of being rough around the edges, then you can consider your rough edges as the lines of beauty in your ridges would have invited you to consider them. I'm sitting on a stone in the valley where you have this beautiful waterfall behind me, and here runs a river which refreshes, and it is surrounded by the beauty of the greenery that is the vegetation that is present on the hill that surrounds this waterfall. And as we look on the hills that surround us, we see these mountains, these hillsides. And what do we see when we look at these hillsides and these mountains? We see trees, and as sentiments of the reflection or the prose invites us to consider the beauty in our ridges. We know that trees provide us with oxygen, So today I would like to encourage and inspire you and uplift you. If you feel that you are rough around the edges, that those edges provide beautiful trees, that provide shade for those who are around us, those who are around you, those who depend on you, within your immediate family, within your immediate circle of friends. You provide in your rough edges something that benefits those persons around you. And therefore, it is an invitation to reconsider your rough edges for the positives that it provides. The very nature of a hillside isn't very smooth. It is rough. And if you can picture somebody who is, for example, into mountain climbing, it is those rough edges and those grooves within the mountain or the hillside that really facilitates their ability to climb those hills and those mountains. So it takes somebody with the eyes to see beyond what could just be plain rough edges in you, to really appreciate the beauty that those rough edges represents. Those rough edges provides, as mentioned before, trees that grows on those rough edges. And from those trees, they intake the oxygen. They give us oxygen, but biology tells us that they absorb carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide from the atmosphere, and they provide oxygen to us who rely on oxygen for our own survival and our own sustenance. So therefore, your rough edges, my rough edges, serves a purpose in our lives and in our existence. And therefore, we need not be ashamed of our rough edges, because there is quality and beneficial qualities in those rough edges. The beauty in your rough edges gives birth to trees that provides oxygen, as we have previously explored. The beauty in your rough edges provides refreshment. Consider the waterfall behind us. Many people come to the river, especially during the summers, to be refreshed, to get away from the grueling heat of summer. And water in and of itself is refreshing. It revives us, it rejuvenates us when we are tired, when we are hot and sweaty, and we look to water for that sustaining experience that refreshes us, that cleanses us of so many things. And oftentimes when we consider, for example, the hills and mountains, which are synonymous with rough edges, in the valley where we are now, normally flows a stream, a river, that offers water, that offers an opportunity for us to refresh ourselves when we are tired and weary. Just maybe today, I would ask us to consider the rough edges in our lives. But consider them in the context of how it is that those rough edges provide shelter. And not shelter in a negative way, but shelter in a positive way. For those of our friends and families who depend on us for shelter. Those rough edges provide the oxygen that those around us need those around us who depend on us need to survive. Those rough edges provide refreshing water. It's a stream, it's a tributary, it's a river that provides water that refreshes those around us. So if ever someone should say to you that you are rough around the edges, but they do not mean it in a positive light, I would ask that you and I consider those rough edges, but with the bloom of a new perspective. A new perspective which says that I might be rough around the edges, but these rough edges provide shelter for you. It relieves you somehow from the grueling heat of the sun. It provides an opportunity for you to be refreshed, to be rejuvenated in your moments of tiresomeness, in your moments of thirst, for whatever you thirst for. I am that rough edge that will refresh you. So today, from the Penfield River, I trust that the muse of beauty in our ridges would have provided you with encouragement, with inspiration, and with upliftment as we seek to take those things that might be perceived as negative in our lives and reframe them. Because whilst we might see them as being negatives, there is something positive that we can take away from our rough edges. Until our next episode, I hope that you will remain safe as we continue to journey through the season of the pandemic, and to take an inventory of the many rough edges that we have and see how we can bloom a new perspective that's as beautiful as the waterfall which is behind us, and as the grandeur of the mountains that surrounds us at the Penfield River in Gordontown, St. Anne.
There you have it, this week's Musings. We hope you found it encouraging, inspiring, and uplifting. Let Fabian know your thoughts by leaving a comment on this video. Do spread the word and invite others to subscribe to Musings Television. Until next week, may your hearts remain ever joyful.